discuss for 1.9. He himself won't be able to join, unfortunately, but we can discuss those.
He's here.
Is he? Oh, he just joined. Okay. He told me that he probably wouldn't.
Yeah, so I have to go to another meeting for the first 15 minutes of this. I just came on so I could start the recording. So I can probably come back at 12:15. But yeah.
Okay. So I guess I can also start recording. I don't know. At least I see one record button here.
Oh, you can try it if you want. But anyway, it's definitely recording on my end.
Oh, okay. No, actually, it shows me when I push it, it shows me a message that I need to have permission. So, anyways, I guess you should just start it. Okay, so I can actually let me give the link of this document. This window, the chat window. It's already there. Maybe it's not the same thing. No, it's not. All right. So, Tim, do you want us to go through the list for 1.9, or do you want to start with the other doc?
Why don't we, because Connor put an agenda item on first, and we've already kind of talked about 1.9 last cycle. Why don't we let Connor go through his agenda item first, and then we can
yeah, sounds good.
Go to 1.9.
Sure.
Want to take it away, Connor?
Sure. Actually, I see that Jiaying is on the line, and she's the one who filed the issue. So, did you want to introduce it, Jiaying?
Yes, sure. So this is just like we noticed a behavior change related to the extended resource PR. So in 1.8, we have PR that introduces the extended resource. So basically, we consider all the resources outside of the Kubernetes default namespace as extended resource, and we extend some scheduler predicate to consider extended resource as an opaque integer, and we also check whether the node has enough resource quantity for extended resource. So this is a behavior change for any resource name outside of the default Kubernetes namespace, because before this PR, the scheduler wouldn't reject them, even though there is no actual resource advertised by the node. But now with this PR, we would mark the pod with insufficient resource error before we even send the pod to any scheduler extender if there exists some. So I just want to check, Connor and I, we would like to check with you guys to see whether we could consider this as working as extended, or like we should think more about this.
So one thing which was not very clear is this. So as far as I can remember, in our predicates, we were checking extended resources. And if there was not enough extended resources in the past, we were still rejecting. Well, basically, we were not considering that node as a feasible node, if I am not wrong. So what is
no, that's not what happened before. So previous to 1.8, you would add if you advertised sorry, not advertise, but if you try to consume from your container resource spec, like example.com/foobar, then the scheduler would just completely ignore it and schedule it anyway, even if the node didn't have that resource.
I see. Okay. Yeah, but anyhow, so this new change sounds fine to me, unless other people have objections. But it seems to be natural, and we should not really schedule a comment and note that doesn't have whatever the resource request is.
Yeah, so it's Vishnu here. So the thing that I want to say is that there are use cases for opaque integer resources in the past, specifically around, say, software licenses and so on, which is not really like It's not really a node resource, and it's not like part of the node lifecycle. So it's like we don't have a concrete use case for such things yet. Like it's not yet well defined in the ecosystem. So in that sense, maybe we can reject it, but I just want us to be like a little bit more thoughtful before saying that like the new behavior should be the default behavior.
So, yeah, I mean, you have a valid point. At the same time, why should a pod specify some resources in the request if none of the nodes have it? I mean, it doesn't seem to be like a natural, correct configuration to me, anyway.
Yeah, it's mainly for.
So one possible use case is, I think Vish also mentioned, is some kind of cluster level resource that is not necessarily advertised by individual nodes, but we expect to have some kind of scheduler extender to handle them. But now the behavior is we could reject the pod before even calling extender.
Yes, I can see those. But do you know what were, for example, you know, this was an example that Vish gave. So what were those extenders doing with those extended resources? I mean, when pods were requesting them, what were those extenders doing with the extended resources? Do you know?
So they can dynamically set up the resource on some nodes or like allocate the resources on some nodes and then return the candidate node list to scheduler.
Okay. Well, yeah, it seems a little bit unorthodox to me. But anyhow, if we are going to have this new change, I am fine with it. And we may want to have a feature gate that prevents failures in existing clusters. But otherwise, it should be fine.
Well, hold on, Bobby, just to make sure I understood you correctly. I think it is a bug if we cannot have extenders advertise resources, right? Like there can be cluster level resources that are not tied to any node and that are advertised via the scheduler. And so we need
Wait, what do you mean by advertised via scheduler?
as in like as of today, like the only way for figuring out what resources are available in a cluster is by probing node objects. But it doesn't make sense to associate cluster level resources with node objects. So the discovery aspect, which I guess is what we commonly refer to as advertising, is probably not going to be straightforward for such resources. Mm-hmm. But consumption can still happen through scheduler extenders. And like maybe discovery is through like third-party objects and so on. But at least the consumption aspect can still happen. And if the scheduler was guaranteeing that use case previously and it cannot provide that use case now, and then I don't know, to me it sounds like a bug.
It seems a little weird, like we have a couple of different mechanisms. It sounds to me like there's a couple different use cases and mechanisms that could be potentially leveraged in different ways, right? There's nothing to say that you couldn't leverage the ability to use a dedicated resource, a dedicated cluster-wide resource using something like Quota, right? And having your own plugins. There's nothing preventing you from doing that because that would guarantee you don't overutilize something through admission control itself, right?
Tim, like I'm not sure how like admission control and Quota would play a role in this scheduling aspect here, but I do agree that for advertising a cluster level resource, there needs to be some answer, or for like any resource that's not a first class resource, there needs to be some solution for Quota, limit range, the whole gamut of the resources API.
Yeah.
Is there some best practice documentation about how to manage cluster level resources? If not, I think that would be super helpful. It seems like there's a bit of
yeah, I mean, I don't think there is one. I mean, personally, my team is like trying to tackle introducing a cluster level resource, which would be like Google TPUs. And so we are starting to hit these issues one at a time. And so this might be one of the issues, and like thanks to Jaying for actually like pointing it out.
Yes, I think right now we don't have a way to really support the cluster level resource in some generic way. So we have currently, I think I only know like a volume as a cluster level resource, but the volume is supported as a native, kind of like a native resource in Kubernetes, and we don't really have an architecture to support like a generic cluster level resource.
Yeah, I think overall, I think the cluster level resources should be, they should be distinguished from node level resources. And whatever we have today is not enough to cover them. I mean, the predicates that we have today really want to check everything on a single node, or ignore some of these resources completely and let the extenders handle them. I think that's not enough. Whatever we have today is not enough. And maybe extended resources is not also, at least in my opinion, it's not a good solution to handle cluster level resources. We probably should have a separate concept for them so that we can handle them better in the future, and also in the current cases that you're talking about. And probably extended resources is not an answer for that.
Are you suggesting maybe we want to introduce separate naming conventions for cluster level extended resources and node level extended resources?
Yes, that's what he's saying. But it wouldn't be, it'd be a whole new construct, a primitive of some kind that has a well-defined semantics. In other systems, these types of things, cluster level resources, are, for lack of better terms, people used to call them concurrency limits, how many things you could run on a cluster at any one moment in time. But that was eons ago for things like licensing, software licensing.
Right, something of that sort. But we should probably make them more generic, something maybe similar to what extended resources do, like pretty much like make them. I don't know. This is just a very rough idea based on our discussions in the past several minutes. But maybe we can have something like scalar resources that we have today, and distinguish them by making them like cluster level, so that we know that there is just one collection of these resources per cluster. They are not associated with a particular node at the time of scheduling, and we just do the accounting based on whatever pod is requesting them.
Right. The problem is that the only API we got right now is a string, and we tried to overload the string, and that makes the user experience really difficult. And in some sense, like user doesn't care whether it's a node level resource or a cluster level resource mostly. And so like trying to introduce naming conventions sort of makes it hard for the user, and possibly makes it simpler for the system. So the question is like, if the scheduler used to support this model where if extended resources were not available on any nodes, the scheduler would still go ahead and like schedule a pod to one of the nodes that it has chosen, and that behavior change, shouldn't that behavior be fixed back or reverted back to its old behavior?
I mean, it causes other problems. If we go and ignore them, there are some other cases that may fail. So for example, I guess we have now implemented huge pages with sort of like extended resources, and well, they are called I guess scalar resources or something like that. But that is a node level resource. And for that, it makes a lot more sense to have scheduler check those on particular node as opposed to like ignore them.
Oh, so hold on. Huge pages are not expected to be extended resources. They were advertised as like first-class resources.
I think currently they are handled in a similar way as extended resources in the scheduler predicate code.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's true, but they're disjoint based on the pattern that they conform to. So they're inside the Kubernetes.io domain. They just happen to follow the same code path, I think, in the predicates.
Yes, we can change the code to separate them out. Yeah, I agree.
In my mind, it would help a lot to see an exact example of a spec behavior, spec, behavior before, spec behavior after. Because in part of my mind, we're talking about it, but I'm not seeing the exact semantics of how something changed. Maybe that's me. I think we're kind of beating around the bush a little bit.
Tim, there's a bug that's listed as part of this agenda, and that has all the background context.
The 53616.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's missing the specification in the spec that I'm looking for.
So just to backtrack a little bit, so Fish, what you would like is for there to be a way to advertise something like an extended resource, maybe a subset of that class that is treated as a node level or a cluster level resource instead of a node level resource. Is that right?
Right. I mean, advertising is less important for me. What is more important is like for having scheduler extenders be able to handle certain set of resources and like handling feasibility checks for them.
I think this requires more discussion. I don't think we can solve this problem in this meeting.
Yes, we can discuss this further in the bug, so I can add related people in that issue if we think we need more time to consider this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I'll be happy to meet or have another meeting with you guys to see what we can do to address this problem.
So extended resources are alpha, so we can change them still, which is good. I still think it would be good to have a design doc, even if it doesn't include any new features, but just best practices for how we expect people to handle cluster level resources.
Yeah, plus fun. I think maybe starting with the user journey is probably going to be more helpful.
Yes, and but I think we also need to figure out whether we want to resolve this problem in 1.8 soon.
Yeah, so Jayang, I think what Connor is saying is like opaque integer resources are an alpha feature, so there's really like not much guarantees around it, and so it's okay to break it. That's my understanding.
Yes, but we are not just breaking opaque integer. We also break any resource that may use naming convention as like outside the default Kubernetes domain.
But they'd have to use it though.
True. Yes. If someone implements some scheduler extender to do that, so we could say like we because we don't officially support them, so we it's okay to break them.
Right.
I'm okay with if a person bought into an alpha resource and it changes behavior. I think that's totally fine for the time being until I don't think it needs to be resolved for 1.8 immediately. I'm in line with Bobby. I think it's a buyer beware thing. So they bought into modifying their spec to use this alpha grade feature, and it doesn't behave the way they expect. That's okay so long as we have a plan for the broader problem in the future.
How about so this is just another idea off the top of my head. So if it's dumb, forgive me. But what if the scheduler extender could subscribe to particular resources, and that would exclude them from consideration for the node level checks?
Yeah, I mean that basically requires predicate checks, like the general predicates being sort of configurable, and I guess like that's the design we got to figure out, right?
They are configurable, but the way that they are configurable today does not address this problem.
I guess what I was just saying is, instead of declaring some sort of a pattern in the resource name, that means that this resource is cluster level. You could just say explicitly in the predicate configuration, don't consider these things as node level resources.
Yes, that could solve the problem, but we will need to find and mark them one at a time or as they appear in the code, right?
Well, so I think the hope is to not make this a compile time thing, but rather a dynamic thing. So you can actually have extenders sort of added out of tree and not require any upstream changes.
Yeah.
Because then that sort of defeats the whole extensibility story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so as I said, I think this needs a little more thoughts. We should probably discuss it in a separate meeting. But thanks for bringing it up. I think this is worth discussing. All right.
Thank you. We can continue the discussion in the issue. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So should we continue with the rest of the 1.9 features that we are working on?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So yeah, I actually sent a link to the doc and the chat window. We have a few things to work on in 1.9. One of the items, as we discussed in the last meeting as well, is to work on reducing open bugs. This requires, I guess, some joint effort with the community and all the people involved. And maybe we need to somehow advertise it somewhere. I don't know if there are people in this meeting who are willing to help us, but we need to find volunteers basically who can help working on these bugs. Tim, do you have any particular suggestion how to move forward with this?
One way that helps a lot is to help people who want to onboard or develop a sort of higher level access to the project. I know Klaus had helped quite a bit in the beginning, and it was a great way for him to onboard, to build up sort of, ownership rights in the community if they want to do that. So if folks want to build street cred, if it matters to their organization to have committership access to the project, then I think that is a good way, or a good means, a carrot, so to speak, versus a stick, to drive people to want to help fix the bugs. There needs to be...
The first step is to find people, actually. I don't know if there are volunteers who are willing to help. At least on our side in Google, we are all pretty booked. I haven't been able to find more people on this site, but I don't know if there are people in the community who are willing to help.
It doesn't hurt to advertise. I know like a couple of releases back, we advertised. I haven't done the advertising in the 1.8 cycle, but I did do it in 1.6, and that's actually when we found a whole bunch of other folks. So if we want to, I could try to do another sort of PR push to sort of like a call to action across Twitter and other email lists to try and solicit folks who want to get involved.
Yeah, that would be great. And I am happy to help them to get on board and be productive, hopefully in a shorter amount of time. All right. So the next item is priority and preemption. There are a bunch of items that we would like to add to move this closer to beta. The plan today is to not move it to beta in 1.9. The reason for that is that the starvation, fixing the starvation problem that is discussed in the user docs and also in the design that I wrote earlier requires some major changes to the scheduler. And those changes, we think that those changes are risky a bit, so we don't want to move everything to alpha at this point. We probably want to keep it in alpha in 1.9, fix these problems, add the features that we like adding pod disruption budget support, and then 1.10, hopefully we can move it to beta. We would also like to add some other features like why pending to make priority and preemption a little bit more understandable for users. So when they see that their pods are not scheduled, they can go and look at why pending and see what is the reason that these are not being scheduled. That's about it. Find the releases, try. Okay.
Is there a plan? I talked about it briefly during the community meeting, but we should probably talk about it here too. Is there a plan for when we will deprecate critical pods and how we will go about doing that?
There is, well, we know that we are going to do it, but if you're asking if we know when exactly it's going to happen, no, we don't have a clear date for deprecating them. Basically, we need to wait a bit until this priority and preemption gets to beta, I think, and then we can deprecate that.
It's also an alpha opt-in feature, right? So is there an urgency towards deprecating it?
Wait, what do you mean it's an alpha opt-in fee? The priority and preemption is. But once it goes to beta, I think it's going to be confusing to have the critical pod rescheduler and preemption going on at the same time. I don't think that'll be a good user experience.
No, it's a really bad one. And people plan their deployments. So I work on SIG cluster lifecycle, and us planning to have the pods have their priority preset as part of the control plane standup is super duper important. And this reduces our dependency on what was the rescheduler from the contrib repo.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should try to deprecate whatever that means in this context, the rescheduler at the same time as it goes to beta, as priority and preemption goes to beta. Yeah. I mean, I think which is kind of what Bobby was saying, but like I think we do need a concrete plan for doing that. I don't think, yeah.
Right. That's what I was saying. I think when priority and preemption goes to beta and becomes enabled by default, there we should probably we should also disable critical pods.
Is the swag for that like 110?
Yes, that's
okay.
All right, and also we would like to add priority in resource quota. Priority in resource quota means that users will have a certain amount of quota at a particular priority level if it's enabled in their clusters, so that users cannot have all their pods scheduled at the highest priority. Harry, with the GitHub IDF resource or something like that, is working on that. The design doc for it is almost finalized. We're close to merging it, and hopefully we can have it soon as an alpha feature as well, hopefully in 1.9. So yeah, so there is also this discussion that has been going on. I will send an email about it to SIG scheduling very soon. We should finalize what we want to do with the daemon set scheduling. We have been going back and forth between the two ideas of letting the scheduler schedule them or letting the daemon set controller schedule them. Today, the daemon set controller schedules them, and there are some people who are in favor of this approach because they say that there are lots of critical system pods, which are daemon set pods, and when they are scheduled by the daemon set controller, we are sure that they can be scheduled even if the default scheduler is replaced by a custom scheduler in various clusters. So that's a valid argument. There are, of course, some drawbacks with this approach, like daemon set controller needs to have some scheduling logic, and we need to maintain two places when we add, for example, new predicates. And the daemon set controller needs to have more memory state of the cluster in order to make scheduling decisions faster. So that increases the total amount of memory consumption on a master node and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm gonna send an email. I don't think that we can finalize that decision here. I'm gonna send an email to SIG scheduling to discuss this further, and we should involve people like Brian, who is in favor of letting daemon set controller schedule these pods. If there is any more thoughts on that, we're happy to hear it now.
I've always been in favor of, how do I put this? Making the core set of scheduling pieces more modular and reusable by other components. That was actually an effort that we started while I was still at Red Hat, but it never saw its way all the way through to fruition. It was going to be a multiple release type of project where we were working on pieces of it over time, as part of the technical debt pay down. But as I've moved on from Red Hat, and some of the other people that were on my team have also moved on, there's no one currently actively doing that. That's another area that I think, where a community person who wants to get their feet wet could break down some of the pieces of the scheduler to be much more modular, so that they can easily be linked in by things like a foreign scheduler or the daemon set controller.
Yeah, I agree. Let's just discuss it in an email thread. As you said, there are ways to improve the modularity and make them make sort of like maintaining a separate module easier than what it could be today. All right, so there is another item is the scheduler work. I think Avesh is here. Avesh, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, hi. So regarding this scheduler, I think last week or before that we did one release that does like the scheduling based on node utilization, and also evicts pod if there are duplicate pods related to some high level controller like replica set and replica controller job or deployments. And now basically like what we are working, we are targeting already there is one PR by Ravi evicting pod, those are not honoring pod affinity or anti-affinity. And now next we are targeting for node affinity, the pods which are not honoring node affinity, or the pods which are targeting node affinity. And if we have set of nodes where we want them to schedule, but those pods don't satisfy node affinity there, then maybe we should not evict those pods. So like both kinds of whether we should evict those pods, whether we should not evict those pods. So those things we are working right now. So probably, and we are also working on rebase. So that we are, rebase for higher, either for 1.8 or 1.7.6 or some latest 1.7 release. So that's what we are targeting for our next deschedule release. And we have other roadmap also in README on descheduler. So basically like one by one we are working on those items, and we will keep releasing, we will keep doing the regular releases whenever we have something concrete. Bobby, I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
Okay, so sorry, I was muted. So I was saying, maybe I misheard you, but were you saying that you're working on rebase pods? I heard
No. Rebasing descheduler code base, because right now the descheduler code base is based on some early release of 1.7. We are working to rebase that to some latest release of 1.7, and then after that to 1.8.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So there is a PR on changing scheduler configuration, the way that we are changing scheduler configuration. It's a relatively large PR that is changing a lot of stuff around scheduler configuration and how it's done. I need to work on that, and I need to review that. And I appreciate if other people can also take a look. It has a lot of changes to the way that we configure our scheduler. If you have any concerns or comments, please feel free to add it to the PR. So another relatively major item is to add max number of pods per topology key for pod anti-affinity. This PR has been around for a while, and we were expecting to merge it in 1.8, but that didn't happen. So We now would like to add it in 1.9. Klaus has been working on that. So hopefully we can finalize and merge it in 1.9. I don't think Klaus can attend these meetings, so he cannot add more. So another item that Yasin is working on is ordering of predicates. The idea there is that we would like to be able to specify the order at which predicates are executed. And the main reason or motivation behind it is that some of the predicates take longer than the others, and they are more complex. And at the same time, some of those simpler ones are more restrictive. For example, you may be able to filter a lot of nodes at a much quicker time if you run certain predicates before some other ones. So this PR is trying to design the idea. There are two concepts there. One is to have a static ordering, which is sort of like a default ordering for the predicates. So we try to run the predicates which are more restrictive and are faster sooner than the other ones. We know that affinity and anti-affinity is one of the slowest ones that can be executed last when a lot of other nodes are already filtered out. That's the idea. It's still in the design phase. If you have any comments, please feel free to add it to the design document. And also, there was this, in this design, there is a part that says that we need to let users define the ordering in the policy config. I'm not so sure if this is really required by a lot of users, but I've heard that some users have built their own custom schedulers only to do this, only to reorder predicates. I understand that why they might have done it in the past, because we were not so smart about about running some of the predicates sooner than the others. But now with the static ordering that we're introducing, I'm not so sure if there are a lot of users who may want to really configure the order of these predicates in their configs. So I was thinking that maybe we should wait for users to ask for it before we implement it. If people in the meeting already know about users who definitely would like to have this option, please raise your hand or say something now.
I would vote against it because it seems like yet another foot gun for someone to foot gun themselves with, right? Yeah. We already, if we do other things like make it easier to build your own scheduler, which will pay down the technical debt, that gets other people into the game to do customized things that they want to do anyways. So that was always our long extended plan.
Right. At the same time, I think it's going to be a lot of work for a user to just, and also maintenance work for a user to just reorder predicates. So if that's a need by a relatively large number of users, or a few users, at least major users, we should probably do it. But I still have a hard time believing that there are a lot of users who may want to customize it, despite the fact that scheduler will do it sort of like in a smart way.
I've never heard of a request like this before.
Okay, that's what I've also said in a design doc, that I think having something like this in the design doc is fine, but I'm not so sure if we should rush into implementing the dynamic ordering or configurable ordering. So the last item is Kube Arbitrator. I don't know if people in the meeting know enough about it. I don't have a whole lot of information about that. Is there anyone who wants to add any more information about it?
I think just that it's just a PSA that ongoing work is there for people who want to do multiple Elastic workloads on Kubernetes in a Mesos-esque type fashion, but with all of the policy constraints in place that Mesos doesn't have across workloads, then go look there, because there's ongoing work there, and that's good stuff so far.
Okay. So apparently the plan is to have it in 1.9 or something in 1.9, but I don't know exactly what is going to be there.
It's ongoing work. So I think their releases for anything outside of the core is asynchronous. So it's just more of a PSA.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Any other item that we would like to discuss? Anyone?
Even for 1.9 or in general?
In general, 1.9 we have already kind of covered. If you have more items, please add, or if you have any other general topics, please bring it up.
Yeah, just one item I wanted to discuss regarding resource limits consideration in Kubescheduler. In fact, I sent an email to Kubescheduling mailing list. I don't know if guys got a chance to look at that. Although it might not be a lot of work, I think, but I was wondering if you would like to have something like that. And I gave some example use cases where that might be useful.
Okay, sure. I haven't had the chance to look at the email, but I saw that you sent an email. Yeah, if there is anything that you'd like us to discuss it right now, we can do so, as we have still a few minutes left.
Yeah, basically, I can explain here again. Okay. So, like, I mean, as usual, like when pods specify their limits, but because scheduler only works based on pods request, and as I gave an example in my email, that let's say there is a pod that is requesting 1 core of CPU, and the limit is requesting limit of 8 core of CPU, and there are nodes, some nodes with 4 cores and some nodes with 16 cores. I think in current implementation, scheduler would not make any difference and might choose any one of them, considering other things are same. But if we have a priority function that also considers limits, then maybe it might choose node which are having 16 cores, so that they could satisfy pods limits in a better way than the nodes that are with 4 cores.
Right, it makes sense. So I think it should be a priority function, not a predicate. It should be a priority function.
Right.
To try to prefer those nodes who have enough resources to cover the limit.
Right.
Okay, yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah. So,
but how would you take into account best effort pods? Or like pods without any limits?
I mean, exactly. I mean, the way they are being the way they are being considered right now, I think we won't make any special consideration for them. Only for pods which are like bustable pods or guaranteed pods, we might do that. Not for best effort pods.
Even for burstable, limits are not necessary, right?
Yeah.
If something doesn't have a limit, I guess it doesn't go through like priority.
Yeah.
Right?
So I mean, the idea is if a pod specify limits, we might consider that. If some pod does not specify, I mean, it's the same thing like what we have currently.
Yeah.
So there's the flip side of that, which is if there happens to be a pod on a node which does not have any limits, then just consider by default that node is fully occupied in terms of limits. I mean, that like how would you, like, when you try to rank the available nodes based on priority or like based on amount of limits that have been committed, and if there happens to be a single pod which doesn't have any.
I think in compute, as far as I hope I understand your question correctly. I think the way we are computing resources in scheduler, that is not going to change. Only during prioritization we are going to take limits into account. So otherwise nothing is going to change the way resources are computed, and from that point of view, if I understand your question correctly. So in resource computation, the way the scheduler is doing right now, it would keep doing the same thing. Only like when we are prioritizing the nodes, which node to pick up or which nodes to choose, we might just consider limits, not for the actual resource computation. That is always going to happen. I mean, at least for now, based on request only.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess what I'm trying to say is like if there happens to be, if your cluster lets pods run without limits, then the value addition through this extra priority filter might be very much diluted because all nodes are fully occupied. So it's like how would you prioritize them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is, let's say there are two nodes, the way you are describing, and they are exactly, I mean, or let's say like we just have two nodes, and maybe they are, as you said, fully occupied or utilized. But even then, if we have some node some pod that is specifying limits, maybe we might choose among one of the two nodes that is still better able to satisfy that pod's limits. Uh, I'm not sure like why, because why would it make any difference?
Right, Vish, I'm not so sure. Yeah, like Vish said, I'm not so sure if your concern is
Yeah,
very valid, because let's say that all the pods, all the nodes in a cluster are all occupied and don't have enough to satisfy the limits of a pod. But why should we care? I mean, none of
I mean,
them
I think
will be prioritized over the others. We just
because in that case, some predicate function would fail anyway, so it won't go up to that prioritization, I think.
I mean, no, I guess Vish's point is that predicates pass because nodes have enough resources to satisfy the request, but they don't have enough resources to satisfy the limits. Is that right, Vish?
So I'm just saying that like the value addition through this extra priority filter might not actually be available because if a cluster happens to let a pod run without limits, and if there are enough of them on like each of the nodes, then like there really isn't a single node available that has some guaranteeable limits because all of them have like given up their entire capacity.
Yeah, there's no guarantee. I guess in this work, there is no guarantee about anything. It's just a preference. We prefer a node
Right.
that it might be a better choice for running this pod, as opposed to like, yes, choose this node because it has guaranteed resources. This is not going to
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fine. I think if we like from a user standpoint, like if I'm trying to consume this feature, then maybe we should also state that we recommend always specifying limits through limit range or something for your pods, so that you can actually get this neat distribution model, right?
Makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, that's what like I.
Okay. Anyone else? I guess Ronald has also mentioned in the chat that he's here to code, so I assume he is willing to help. I will be happy to work with you, Ronald, if you're willing to work on any items or you already have some ideas about the areas that you would like to contribute.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm definitely. I don't know if I'm truly the new guy, but I'm the new guy here. So just real quick, just to give you my background, the company I work for, we do training and consulting largely around container tech stuff, and like I think Tim was mentioning earlier, part of this is just quite frankly for me to get street cred. But just academically, I'm just interested in scheduling and like workflow optimization and things like that. Definitely new as far as like coding the Kubernetes. I've used it for, taught about it for a long time. But, as a kind of, we're not a SaaS, right? So I don't like just use it day in and day out. So yeah, any kind of guidance, I'm happy to jump in. I have quite a bit of time, I would say, to actually work on some things, but I still got to ramp up. So anything I can do, I'll try to help.
Sounds great. Let me, I will think, and I also ask Tim to think about a bite-sized project that can get you started. Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, awesome, thanks.
All right, anything else?
I mean, I have just one thing regarding the some contributions. I saw like I think this week or the past week, there were some guys who were interested in contributing. In fact, they asked some questions on Slack. I answered. So maybe I don't know whether those guys have joined the series scheduling mailing list or maybe just by going back and seeing the history of Slack, maybe I can find those guys and still ask, or maybe anyone of can ask if they are still interested in contribution.
Yeah, actually, that I'm very bad with following the discussions on the Slack. But sometimes I take a look, but it's usually hard for me to catch up.
But
It
yeah,
would be great if we can somehow. I don't know. Maybe we should.
there were at least two guys, like two persons who were interested, I think, in contributing.
Yeah, I'm thinking something like have a document or something that people can go and leave their contact information so that we know that they are interested in contributing and we can contact them and assign tasks to them. Or maybe they can just send an email to the mailing list, our scheduling mailing list. Either way, I think would be great because it's usually hard for me to catch
Yeah.
up like chats.
Maybe I can find them and see if they are interested, still interested.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Please do that. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everyone. We got 8 minutes back. Bye.